From start to finish, Sarah Boone's defense attorney, James Owens, has done everything in his power to cause ruckus or distraction or delays. He interrupted rebuttal witness testimony continuously. And I guess here it was his final Hail Mary. But shame on him because this was probably the tackiest thing that he did. Turning around and telling Jorge Torres' mother that he thinks she needs to get out of the room. I think it should be noted that his mother did state in an interview that she had never watched the Suitcase videos and she never wanted to watch the Suitcase videos. This all occurred during closing arguments on Friday evening, and as we suspected, they did play the video of George being in the suitcase and begging to get out. Let's get to it.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
Fuck you.
Sarah.
Fuck you.
Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
Sarah. I can't fucking breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do and choke me.
Sarah.
Can I ask you to go out?
Owens just said something. Oh no. I see. His mama's never seen this, you guys. She's never watched that video. Bless her heart. Now, stupid writing. Oh, she's passing notes. Of course she is. She shows zero remorse. This jury is going to see this, you guys. Acting like this when she should just be sitting there, looking forward, being still.
You may continue. Charge involved in this case. You do not have any discussions among yourselves or anyone else. We'll bring it back in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
All right. Very accident.
How you feeling, Sarah? Not looking too good. Actually, she looks a little white there.
I've got a motion.
Okay, may proceed.
Sarah Boone's entitled to a fair trial. I think that right's been compromised here today. I don't know who's scheduled to put the two detectives on the front row with the Torrez family, the family of the victim. But they had to have known to tell them that the Suitcase video, which has been around for 4.5 years, was going to be played during opening statement. And the state attorney's office or the sheriff's department had to advise them, or the victim's advocate had to advise them, that if they couldn't take it, in front of a jury that's trying to decide the case. They needed to get out of the courtroom. Now, what happened here today should not ever happen. There should be safeguards in place. There's no room for this after 2 weeks of murder trial for something like that to happen. One of the Torrez members of the family audibly, during the 2-minute Suitcase video, expressed some kind of emotional reaction. I look back, he or she were bent over in agony.
Okay, may proceed.
I've got a motion.
Okay, may proceed.
Sarah Boone's entitled to a fair trial. I think that right's been compromised here today. I don't know who's scheduled to put 2 detectives on the front row with the Torrez family, the family of the victim. But they had to have known to tell them that the Suitcase video, which has been around for 4.5 years, was going to be played during opening statement. And the state attorney's office or the sheriff's department had to advise them, or the victim's advocate had to advise them, that if they couldn't take it in front of a jury that's trying to decide the case, they needed to get out of the courtroom. Now, what happened here today should not ever happen. There should be safeguards in place. There's no room for this after 2 weeks of murder trial for something like that to happen. One of the Torrez members of the family audibly, during the 2-minute Suitcase video, expressed some kind of emotional reaction. I look back, he or she were bent over in agony, physical pain. The physical pain followed the audible announcement. You can't unring that bell. That's their responsibility to ensure that kind of thing doesn't happen, especially when they know they're going to show a video and the family of the victim is on the front row. I've never heard of such. I asked for a mistrial.
Response.
I've never heard of such a request. The victim's family has the right to be here. They were advised as to what will be used during closing arguments. I cannot make a decision for the victim's family and the homicide survivors whether or not they believe they can handle it. She clearly, or he, I don't know, couldn't, and I believe the appropriate thing was done. They left the courtroom. But again, to say this is intentional sabotage and all the accusations that continuously get made are unsubstantiated. And it does not warrant a mistrial. People get warned, and sometimes they misjudge their own emotions. I don't understand what test we are expected to run on homicide survivors. So the motion should be denied.
Motion's denied. Jury's going to be back in about 13 minutes, counsel. So we'll reconvene at that point in time.
Could the state put the Suitcase back in the water?
Yeah, can we clean the well from the state's materials, please? Thank you.
James, what's your reaction to the verdict?
Just disappointed. Sarah's devastated. She's disappointed. We felt like we had a good defense with the facts that we had. Obviously, we had some hurdles to overcome for the state's evidence. And for whatever reason, the jury didn't see it our way. We respect the jury's decision. I'm sure that Sarah Boone is going to want to appeal. I believe that she does have potentially 2 or 3 good appellate issues. So the next thing in store is I think we've got sentencing set for, I believe, Monday, December the 2nd at 1:30. And we intend to call Dr. Harper as a witness to speak about her other mental health issues that she struggles with, and hopefully the court will consider that.
Mr. Owens, Sarah Boone was offered a plea deal in this case, manslaughter. She did not take it. What do you think now, having the verdict?
Well, ultimately, that's their decision. You know, they've got a couple of fundamental decisions. One is whether to plead guilty to anything, and the other is whether to go to trial, and the other is, you know, whether to testify, and then the other is whether to appeal. And so Sarah Boone maintained that she wanted a trial the entire time, and we did discuss, there were plea negotiations, and there were offers on the table for the lesser charge of manslaughter. But Sarah ultimately rejected those offers and wanted her day in court.
She felt, it seemed throughout this entire trial, she seemed to be very upbeat. It seemed, though, I was getting the sense she really felt she hadn't done anything criminally wrong.
Well, I think, you know, I believe she's a battered spouse, and I believe she believes she's a battered spouse. Once she learned, and we gave her a bunch of material about the subject, once she learned, you know, what she had gone through with Jorge Torrez, I think she believed she was a battered spouse. So we believed in that scenario that she was justified in defending herself. And so she felt good because she had a defense, and she had lawyers. You know, initially she was going to represent herself, and then she did that for a while. And I think she appreciated the fact that we came in, myself, Tony Henderson, and Kevin Beck, and then our team. We had, you know, 5 or 6 people working on the case for the last 45 days trying to get ready for trial. And I think she appreciated our efforts. She knew we were working hard. I've been here in Orlando for 3 weeks, and then the rest of the team's been here for 2 weeks. So we've been doing everything we could do to represent her to the best of our ability, and that's what we did with the time that we had.
You really put up a good fight. Were you surprised that the jurors came back as quickly as they did?
I was. I think that, you know, the rebuttal evidence where they played a bunch of videotapes of off Sarah's phone, where there were some interactions with Sarah and George, I think that affected the jury.
What do you think another big challenge was for you in this case?
Well, of course, the Suitcase video is difficult to deal with. And then, you know, her interrogation, the 2-hour interrogation at the sheriff's department. So, I mean, you know, we have evidence. That's probably the best evidence in a case, is videotape oftentimes is the best evidence. And, you know, we had some big hurdles to overcome. And obviously the jury, and I respect the jury's decision, saw it a different way than we presented.
During your closing arguments, one of the things that you talked about was we're in 2024, and the perception that the state may be trying to give that she in a way deserved this, that she was the aggressor. You talked about how men are taught not to put a hand on a woman. I thought that that was pretty powerful. I thought that was going to resonate a little bit more with the jury.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it was a long trial and the testimony came out. You know, the state got in a bunch of evidence about, like I said, the video interactions between George and Sarah. And some of that, it seemed like Sarah was berating him a little bit and talking down to him a little bit. And, you know, the state had argued that this was a mutual abusive situation, that Sarah verbally, emotionally maybe abused him. So I think there was some of that going on in the relationship. It was a dysfunctional, toxic relationship. Obviously, those two didn't need to be together, but they, for whatever reason, they could not stay away from each other. And even when she had been battered multiple times by him over time, for whatever reason, they couldn't break up. And it just, I think everybody around, law enforcement, the neighbors, family, all knew how bad the situation was, but for whatever reason, they were drawn to each other and couldn't let go.
The judge made it clear before the verdict was read that he did not want any outbursts in the courtroom. We had one earlier from Jorge Torrez's family. No real reaction from Sarah Boone. I just saw her talking with you, but obviously, as you were mentioning, seems to be not very happy, devastated with the verdict.
Yeah, she couldn't believe it. We were optimistic. You know, we were optimistic, and I understand, you know, these things happen, and there's some murder charge. So, you know, somebody died. So it's difficult for a jury sometimes not to come back with something. And they came back with the highest charge. I was hoping maybe for something lesser, but we understand. Sarah's in shock. You know, it happened, and then she was escorted out of the court fairly quickly. So we really didn't get a chance to talk that much. She said she would call me tomorrow. I'm going to be driving back home. and we'll talk. I'll be on the road for 6 hours, so we'll talk for however long. But I explained to her she had a right to an appeal, and she had 2 or 3 good appellate issues. So I told her to keep her head up.
Mr. Owens, you were not her first attorney. She went through several attorneys. How was she to work with?
She was fine. I think once she realized, it wasn't just me, and I spent a lot of time down here with her. And then once she realized Tony Henderson really helped me out a lot with Sarah Boone. And, I've represented some difficult clients. I've been doing it quite a while. But Sarah, was, of course, she didn't want to give up the power because she'd had the case for 4.5 years. She had so many different lawyers. But I think once she started to trust us and realized that we really cared about her, we really believed in her, and we wanted to do everything we could to fight for her, I think she finally, it didn't take too long for her to develop a sense that we were really genuinely trying to help her. And I think once she saw how hard we were working and everything we were trying to do to help her, we didn't have a problem.
And you got involved with this case because you saw that she had taken out an ad.
Yeah, as you know, the court had ruled that she forfeited her right to a lawyer, a public lawyer. And so she was going to have to represent herself. And I think she went to a couple of hearings and realized that that's a lot harder than it looks. And that's when she had reached out for somebody in the private bar to take the case. And I came down and visited with her, and I agreed to do it. So we were in it to win it. We tried everything we could do to present the case in a fashion that the jury would consider her side.
I think one of the biggest moments was when you got the expert of the states to talk about the fact that she did believe that Sarah Boone suffered from battered spouse syndrome. I thought that was going to be a big game changer for you.
Well, it was. I've got some disagreements about how that was all handled because she came out with an opinion that she had never expressed before.
And then you had to conduct a deposition right there in court.
Yeah, I've never had to do that. That was a first, but it was a unique situation. Of course, the judge had set a date certain about trying the case. So I had the case for about 45 days, but we tried to schedule Dr. Werner's deposition. I believe we took it on October the 4th. And later on, she came up with another opinion that I wasn't aware of until in the courtroom. And so the judge allowed me to take a deposition. I've never heard of it happening before. First time it ever happened, but it did. And, we did the best that we could to counter that and then to cross-examine her. But yeah, I think initially she had said she hadn't made up her mind about it. But I think after a little bit of time, she decided to go ahead and give the opinion that Sarah did suffer from battered spouse. And that corroborated what Dr. Harper had said, that she did suffer from battered spouse syndrome. So I guess that was a good of that.
Any thought in hindsight that maybe there was a motion in limine for you not to use the battered spouse syndrome defense, to not talk about self-defense? Obviously, you got to be able to do that. The state was very clear. She needs to say there's an overt act. She eventually did. She said his hand coming out of the suitcase was that overt act. In hindsight, could there have been another strategy that you could have taken that could have been more successful? Maybe not argue battered spouse syndrome?
No, I don't think so. I think, what she was saying in that 2-minute video to George while he was in the suitcase, I'm convinced was tied to the trauma that she had received from the abuse that she had suffered from George. And I just think Dr. Harper, it's a complex syndrome. It really is. And it's difficult for lay people to understand. I've tried to talk to, the psychologist, the psychiatrist about it to try to understand it. Why somebody wouldn't leave that situation. Why, if they're getting beaten up, they're getting stabbed in the leg, why wouldn't you leave that situation? It's one of those things. It's a head scratcher for a lot of people. And so that's the reason you bring in expert testimony, is to try to explain that to a jury what was going on. But it's difficult for people to really understand.
When Sarah Boone refused the plea offer, the judge made it very clear to her that the minimum he could sentence her to would be 22 years in prison. Is she prepared for the sentencing? It's going to be in December.
I don't think she's prepared. I don't believe that. I think she was in hopes, she was excited about us and she felt like she had a defense and that we were doing everything and she had the experts lined up. So I don't think she was thinking about this at all. I think she was very optimistic. That's why she was optimistic during the trial.
Yes,
She was happy with us every day. She was happy with what we were doing. And of course, she understood that it was a valid defense in Florida. Battered spouse using it to justify the force that you use. So, yeah, she's devastated, and she hadn't come to grips. Like I say, I'll talk to her tomorrow, but she was just stunned today.
Vinny also has a question. Vinny, what's the question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions for James. First, at the sentencing, will this judge have much discretion in what the sentence can be? And do you expect Sarah to express any sense of remorse at sentencing?
At the sentencing, will the judge, Vinny's asking, at the sentencing, will the judge have any discretion? This is her first felony. The judge made that very clear. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, will Sarah Boone say something? Will she express any sort of remorse for what took place? Will she make a statement in allocution at her sentencing? I know you have to take some preparation time for that.
I think the prosecutor had said the low end of the guidelines was 22 years, and I think the judge told Sarah that. So I think that probably is the minimum, unless there's something I'm missing, maybe a downward departure. I don't know that she would qualify, but the judge has a range, and the judge has the discretion, and the judge, is going to hear from the victim's family, and then the judge is going to hear from Dr. Harper, and ultimately the judge is going to have to hear from Sarah Boone about this. I don't know what her position is going to be. But we'll see.
Mr. Owens, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice work.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it.
So there you have it. I guess that was the last attempt by James Owens to defend his client, Sarah Boone. Of all the things I've said about James Owens throughout this trial, the one thing I will say is that he did try. He tried hard. And in his own words, he did the best he could. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a blessed day.